So you've been in a road traffic accident in Scotland. And, once the dust settles, you're probably asking yourself a couple of really big questions. When is this whole thing going to be over? And when will I actually see any compensation? Well, in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly what shapes that timeline, so you have a much better idea of what to expect.
This is it. This is almost always the very first question people ask. And that's completely understandable, right? You just want to know how long you'll be dealing with this before you can finally put it behind you and move on.
And here's the honest, if maybe a little frustrating answer. It depends. I know. That's not what you want to hear. But the really important question is, why does it depend? Once you understand the why, this whole process starts to feel a lot less random and a lot more manageable. To really get to the bottom of it, we need to look at 5 key factors that basically control the timeline. You can think of them like ingredients in a recipe. They combine a little differently for every single claim, which is why every person's timeline is unique.
So, what are they? First, your medical situation. Second, liability, or, who was at fault. Third, how the other side's insured decides to play ball. Fourth, the overall complexity of your claim. And finally, whether or not it has to go to court. Let's break each of these down.
Okay, so this first one is absolutely crucial. Your medical position is, without a doubt, the single biggest factor. A claim should never be settled until your doctors have a really clear picture of your injuries and what your long-term recovery looks like. And why is that? Because once you settle, that's it. You can't go back for more. So the timeline is actually driven by your medical recovery, not by the legal process. Next up, liability. This one's pretty straightforward. If the other driver admits they were at fault, things can move along much more quickly. But if they dispute it, well, now your solicitor has to put on their detective hat and start gathering evidence. We're talking witness statements, dash cam footage, police reports, all to prove who was responsible. That investigation stage can easily add months to the process. Now for the real wild card, a factor that is completely out of your control. The other side's insurer. Some are great. They're efficient, they're reasonable. But others? Well, they might use delaying tactics or make ridiculously low offers to try and slow things down. This is honestly one of the biggest and most unpredictable variables in this whole thing.
And to round it out, we've got complexity and court proceedings. It just makes sense, right? A straightforward case with a single injury is going to be faster than a complex one with multiple injuries or several vehicles involved. And if your case does have to go to court, which, by the way, most don't, you're suddenly on the court's timetable, and that adds a whole new layer to the timeline.
So those are the factors that are all at play. But how do they actually fit together in a real-world claim? Let's walk through the actual journey your claim will take step by step. A typical claim follows these 5 stages. It all starts when you instruct your solicitor. Then you wait for the insurer to respond on liability. Now, step 3, the evidence gathering, especially getting all those medical reports together, that is usually the longest part of the entire journey. Once that's done, your solicitor can value the claim and start the negotiations to settle it. Okay, so now that you have all that context, we can finally start talking about some actual numbers. I know this is what you've been waiting for. What does a realistic timeline actually look like for different types of injuries? All right, here we go. For minor injuries where fault is admitted, you're generally looking at about 6 to 12 months. For more moderate injuries, that pushes out to closer to 1 or 2 years. And for really serious, life-altering injuries, it can understandably take 2 to 4 years, or sometimes even longer, just to get that clear medical picture. But now look at that last column. If there's a dispute over who is at fault, you can easily add another 6 to 18 months on top of any of those estimates. That's a huge deal. Yeah, let's put that in perspective. A dispute over who was at fault can easily double the length of your claim. It is a massive factor. It can turn what might have been a 1-year process into a 2-year process, or even longer. And that brings us to what might be the single most important takeaway from this entire explainer. Why rushing to a quick settlement can be a very, very expensive mistake to make. This is so important to understand. Once you accept an offer, that's it. It's game over. The deal is final and binding. So let's say you settle a whiplash claim after 3 months because you feel okay, but then your symptoms come back with a vengeance and last for another year. Too bad. You can't go back and ask for more money. The door is closed. This is exactly why patience is your superpower here. Your goal and the insurer's goal are often in a direct tug of war. You want a fair settlement that's based on a full, complete understanding of your injuries. But they often want a quick, cheap settlement before that full picture is even known. That's the fundamental tension in this entire process. So, while it might feel like a lot of this is out of your hands, you are definitely not powerless. Let's talk about what you can actually do to help your claim move along as efficiently as possible. All right, here's your proactive checklist. Go to all of your doctor and physio appointments. Keep detailed records of any lost earnings and out-of-pocket expenses. And this one's huge. When your solicitor asks you for information, get back to them as quickly as you can. Every little delay on your end can add up over time. But really, above everything else, this is the key. Your solicitor is going to advise you on when the time is right to settle. That advice is based on their professional experience and, of course, the medical evidence. Trusting that advice is the single best thing you can do to make sure you get a fair outcome. And that really leaves us with this one final, crucial question to think about. Yes, the process can take time, but it takes time for a reason, to make sure the compensation you get truly reflects the full impact this has had on your life. So you have to ask yourself, is a fast settlement really worth the risk of it being an unfair one?